So this is Lisa again, Lisa Tuttle with Maine Quality Counts, and I wanted to just introduce, you can go to the next slide too, Ann Gilbert from Manchester Urology. She's a practice manager there. We're going to talk you through the improvement activity that they have worked to deepen their patient relationships and open up access. And this is the improvement measure from the QPP website that we showed you that Ann and I and with support from Gay felt like this really fit. It was the engagement of patient and families to guide the improvement of the system. Here's the activity information pulled right out of that QPP page. It's a medium, and then Gay being a TCPI practice, they may be rural too. She's probably really close to meeting the scores on that with a medium activity. So Ann, we have you, and are you all set to go?
I am. I'm here, and thank you so much for inviting us.
Great. We're so excited that you're here. So Ann and I are going to just talk through this for you. So Ann, what was the problem that you were trying to fix when you launched your improvement activity?
We were hearing from patients, actually, what was happening is patients were coming in for their appointments, or else they were calling in. They were sharing that the phone was ringing, or else it was very difficult for them to get through. And so as they were meeting with their provider, one of the things that the provider shared with us that a few minutes of their appointment time was being taken up because the patient was sharing with them the difficulty of accessing our office.
Great. So complaints from patients and complaints from providers, that's a pretty strong incentive. And then, Ann, how did you get your team on board to start the improvement?
It wasn't hard to get them on board because everybody knew that we had an issue that we needed to address. So what I started to do was actually, as the provider came to me and told me about the patient and their concerns, I actually asked the patient after their visit to join me in our conference room, and I sat down and I listened to them. I actually heard what they were saying, what were the problems, and how would they like to see it changed? Because many of our patients are repeat patients due to the fact of we see a lot of patients with cancer. Then the next thing I did is I actually put myself on the phones, and I started answering phone calls so that I could hear what the patient was saying first line. How long did it take them to get in? What was happening? So I could understand what their frustration was.
Great.
And then the last thing I did was actually walk around, and I could hear what they were saying in the office so that I could try to address. Because again, it is even though it's our patients and our family, it's our staff too.
Great. So I love that. And when I first talked to Ann about this, I just loved this listening, creating deeper relationships. So then what did you actually do, just in brief?
So what we looked at is the first thing I looked at, how many number of calls were coming in a day. And perhaps just somebody that's going to be successful on the phone, they should get no more than 100 calls a day. Well, we had 2 people on the phones, and they were getting way over 100 calls a day. So then the next thing I looked at was our phone tree. As you call in, we have a phone tree. So what we did is I actually worked with our phone company, and we re-engineered our phone tree to make it more user-friendly for our patients. And then what we did is got where the high volume of calls, what we did is re-engineered that so that they were going right to the person and they didn't have to go through our first line staff. The next thing I did, we had to bite the bullet, and we had to hire 1 more staff member. We knew we were 1 person short. So we added 1 more person on the phones. And then I actually requested to have what we call the super board. So I know in our practices, because we have 3 practices, I see what's going on with the volume of calls. I can actually see it on my desk. I can see the lights lighting up. I can see when people are on Do Not Disturb. I can actually see when we're having problems in areas. And then as we did that, then I sat back, and then I started to hear our next problem was access to appointments.
And you also told me that in the course of this improvement, you implemented a text messaging process with your patients.
Oh, so that's right, Lisa. So one of the things we did is we were actually doing manual reminder calls every day. So what was happening is as our medical assistants became free with their providers, they were actually making outbound calls for reminder calls. And then because of that, our patients were having a hard time getting in on our lines. So we went to an automated reminder system where they actually call the patients 3 days before. But in that process, the patient, if they want to receive a text the first time they get a reminder call, they get something on their phone that says, would you like to get text messages moving forward? And if they press approve, then moving forward, they get a text message. And that's how we set that up. And we monitor that every day. And people can communicate with us through text messaging. And so the patient never has to call in here. What we can do is we manage everything for them. We even can do reschedulings for them. And then what we do is call them and give them a date for the reschedule.
Great. So, Ann, what were your outcomes and measures?
So our outcomes, definitely what we were seeing was that patients were starting to say to us, we actually were starting to get very good feedback from patients. Actually, patients were coming and sharing with us that, what have you done with your phone system? I can get in right away. I can talk to someone right away. Providers were sharing with us that the concerns that were being shared at the beginning of their appointments were no longer there, that actually patients were sharing with them that the improvements that had been made had greatly improved their satisfaction of them calling into the practice. And they were very pleased that we had listened to their concerns.
Great. I'm going to have to move you on really, really quickly here, but I know that the other thing that you told me is that you saw improvements in reductions in people going to the ER, and you also now have designed a postcard to gather systematically patient experience information.
Right. So one of the things we did from this also was, because we were answering the phones in a timely manner, we were also looking at what we had for appointments that were available every day. So what we were doing with that is actually I look at the daily schedule every day for the next day. And then we send out a huddle to say where we have available appointments, because we have 2 offices that a patient can go to. The other thing is I'm actually holding appointments up on Mondays and Fridays, and I release them a few days before, so we have available appointments. And I'm blocking a lot of the days after a holiday, because that's when patients are calling, so they can get into our office instead of having to go to the emergency room or urgent care. Great. And the next thing that we're working on is a postcard survey. We want to know from our patient what's the next project we should be working on.
Great. That's great. And thank you so much for sharing. I'd love to keep you going on this and for all of you to hear some of the more details, but we do have to move to the next example. But Ann, thanks so much for sharing this one.
And thank you for asking me.